Hello, everyone. Welcome back to ZTalks with your host, Zaria Musgrove, where I talk about everything that relates to history and classic literature. Now, today I will be talking about a book that I was literally recommended to around 5 times, but I only recently just got around to reading it. But I am so glad that I did because this book is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Now, this book is a literary masterpiece and a modern classic. So, because of that, you can imagine that this book has a lot of layers, a lot of angles, strong themes, and just generally a lot of things to unpack. And I will try my best to unpack all of those layers and dimensions today so that if you have read the book, you come away with a better understanding and appreciation of it. And if you haven't, you are encouraged to then go and read it. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the main way that I think is the best way to dissect and to go through understanding this book is to start with the main plot and the main characters. And our cast list is five main characters, two of which are twin sisters alongside their husbands. The twin sisters are Olana and Kene, and Olana's husband is Odenigmo, and Kene's husband is Richard. And then we have the fifth and final, but not the least, protagonist, which is Ugwu. He is the character which we start this book with and who we kind of start to move through this massive plot with because we start the book with him being commissioned to work for someone else, which is Odenigmo, as his houseboy. So Ugwu moves from his village to go to Nusaka, which is where Odenigmo is, and he works as his houseboy, just doing the general chores and the cooking and the cleaning. And we see the bond and kind of nice and kind of heartwarming relationship in a father and a son way that develops between Ugwu and his master, but we also get a deeper insight into Odenigmo and the intellectual class in southeastern Nigeria through Ugwu, seeing into Odenigmo's living room and his life and the conversations that he has with his friends because Odenigmo is a intellect. He is a teacher at Nusaka University, which is in the southeastern region of Nigeria, which is majority lived in by people from the Igbo tribe. And we get to see the people from this tribe and their conversations and their thoughts around the new and fledgling independence of Nigeria at large, because this book takes place in the 1960s, which is the time when Nigeria gains independence from the British in 1960. So we get this dimension of the book starting off with Ubu and Udenigmo and just seeing into the intellectual class and their dimensions. And then on the other side of the book, we have Olana and Kene, who are from the wealthy class in Nigeria because they grow up in Lagos, which is kind of the business center of Nigeria at this point and still is. But they are polar opposites. Both of them went to school in London, and we actually start the book with them kind of returning to not just returning, but having recently returned to Nigeria, with Olana being more on the side of being regarded as a great beauty. She's always regarded for her looks and her calm nature. And even though they're supposed to look like twin sisters, they aren't. They don't exactly look alike because Kane is not regarded as a great beauty, but she's always known for her sharp wit and intellect. And she's the one that actually is seen by her parents in a more favorable light because she takes on the mantle of the family to take over the family business because of her great mind and her business driven spirit. So we have these two sisters who polar opposites in life, and Olana wants to be a teacher, so she moves to Nusaka to live with Odenigmo, and they eventually get married, and they live there in the southeastern region, while Kane, at the beginning of the book, stays in Lagos and meets our fifth and final protagonist, which is Richard. He is different from all the rest because he is white. Richard offers a different perspective to the war that I will explain later, but also just a different perspective to Nigeria in general because he is an Englishman, and we get to see the book not through a colonial lens because Richard tries as hard as he can to really ingratiate himself in the Nigerian culture through learning the language and actually trying to write a book on the culture, which he never does because he can never find the direction, but he really pushes his efforts to try and do so. And through this, we see just a class of people that are really trying to align themselves with the with the culture, but they never fully can pick up the culture fully because at the end of the day, Richard is white and he can pick up and drop the culture at any time, which we see reminded to us throughout the book when hardships arise. So, this is our main cast: Alana and Kane, their husbands, Richard and Odenigmo, polar opposite sisters, and Ugwu at the center as the houseboy of Odenigmo. And behind these characters and the plot, we have a rich historical background, which I must say, out of all of the novels that I've ever read before, I think this book does history the best. It is generally a masterclass in how to write historical fiction because not only does it put and place the characters inside of the history of Nigeria, but it brings that history forth through having a book within a book. It literally has excerpts of a different book that the author is also writing throughout this novel in different chapters in the book. And at first, when I read these excerpts, I was like, what are these excerpts? Who's writing these excerpts? How do they even match up with the book? Like, what's happening? But as you go on and read these excerpts in the book and in concert with the wider plot, you kind of gain an appreciation for these excerpts because they provide historical and cultural context to what is happening in the time period that the characters are living through as they live through it, which I have never seen done before, but it is expertly done by this author, and it details the historical narrative of Nigeria, starting with where the characters start, which is the independence. And this happens in 1960 for a little historical context. This happens in 1960, and at this time, Nigeria is kind of operating off a unitary government with kind of three main political spheres, with the north, the west, and the east, all with their majority ethnic groups in each sphere, with the north having the Hausa Fulani, the west having the Yoruba, and the east having the Igbo. And there are tensions between this unitary government, which culminates in a coup by military officers that most of them are from the Igbo tribe in the southeast. And this initial coup by these military officers spur on counter coups and struggles in the government that lead to reprisals. and ethnic cleansing of the Igbo tribe. And with this ethnic cleansing, we have people from the Igbo tribe across all of Nigeria migrating to a central point in the southeast in order to flee these reprisals and kind of seek refuge in a place where other people are like them and they know that they could be safe. And with this, we have a culmination of succession because the southeastern region, with majority Igbo persons, with the ethnic cleansings, decide to succeed from Nigeria and become the state of Biafra, which has the flag of half a yellow sun, which is the title of this book because it follows the Biafran secessionist movement, the succession of Biafra, and also the fallout of that and how it impacts the characters. So, with the succession, we also see in the book the novel at large and also the historical excerpts how this is not favored. This succession of Biafra is not favored at all, mainly because of the resource issue, because you could get stuck in one dimension thinking, oh, it's like an ethnic tribe issue, but it's also an economic issue as well, because Biafra at this point in time has the majority of the oil reserves that are located in Nigeria. So, for a fledgling nation that has recently become independent, having one area succeed with most of the economic resources kind of unstabilizes the economy and pulls in a lot of geopolitical interests, which primarily are, you guessed it, the old colonial friend, the British. And alongside other countries that have economic states in this oil and just political stakes in it as well. But who better to explain this geopolitical situation than the author herself from the book within a book that she has in the novel? And also, by the way, the book within the book is called The World Was Silent When We Died, which is a beautiful title and which really gains more importance when you read the book. But she writes an excerpt which says it perfectly. So, quoting the author, starting quote, he writes about the world that remained silent when Biafrans died. He argues that Britain inspired this silence. The arms and advice that Britain gave Nigeria shaped other countries. In the United States, Biafra was under Britain's sphere of interest. In Canada, the Prime Minister quipped, "Where is Biafra?" The Soviet Union sent technicians and planes to Nigeria, thrilled at the chance to influence Africa without offending America or Britain. And from their white supremacist positions, South Africa and Rhodesia gloated at further proof that black run governments were doomed for failure. Communist China denounced the Anglo American Soviet imperialism but did little else to support Biafra. The French sold Biafra some arms but did not give the recognition that Biafra most needed. And many black African countries feared that an independent Biafra would trigger other secessions and so supported Nigeria. End quote. Now, from there, you can get a full picture of the geopolitical interests that were invested in Biafra, with some people using it as a ploy to prove certain things or helping but not really helping. And this whole historical and geopolitical context is kind of in the back, but also in the foreground of the book, like I said, with the excerpt. But it is also still not the main focus of the book because coming back to the characters and the plot, the main focus of the book is how the characters react to the succession because the book traverses in a way where all of the characters end up being in Biafra, and we see how they live on a day-to-day basis and struggle with the main thing that plagues Biafra and actually is the main reason why they yield in the end and why the Biafran state is no more, which is hunger. Biafra really suffered from a famine, which is something that the author really displays so starkly in this book. Now, from my understanding, some two of the main two factors that really played into why this famine happened is one, when people were fleeing their lands to come to Biafra, they didn't do so willingly. A lot of them were chased off of their lands, which were kind of, not even kind of, they were prosperous lands that were sustaining themselves, and because they were rushed off of their lands in other parts of Nigeria quite quickly, they weren't able to take anything with them to Biafra that could actually help them create a new livelihood and sustain themselves. And secondly, there were really intense and harsh military blockades on the night by the Nigerian government on the borders of Biafra, so people weren't able to import food into the new state. So people starved, millions of people died, got kwashiorkor, and lots of children, elderly, regular, anybody just died from hunger. It was a manufactured famine by the war, and you see the effects of it on the characters so acutely, mainly the relationship between Olana and Odenigmo, because we see their relationship displayed more prominently than the one of Kane and Richard, which is in the book and it's also a main relationship, but we follow Olana and her husband more, and we see how this really puts a strain on their marriage, with Olana having to be a mother at the same time as trying to find food for her family and deal with her feelings about the bathroom movement, and if she should still support it because it's hurting her family, but also feeling treasonous if she doesn't, and still pushing really hard to support it. Because remember what I said before, there's a lot of confusion around what's happening on the part of the characters. So in the book, we see all of the characters kind of being fed propaganda and information about the war between Biafra and Nigeria, and how Biafra is always winning and how they're always advancing and gaining more land. And even if they lost, they still counted it or played it off as a strategic loss, and certain information is not really filtering in. So it kind of lends itself to the characters having very fervent beliefs in the Biafran state and not really knowing information that would kind of sway their beliefs, which is that they are losing the war and they are losing more land than they're saying. And in the end, they lose the capital city through the war with Nigeria, and this lets Nigeria reclaim all of the land of Biafra, and the state is no longer here today. So this confusion and misalignment of information is kind of something that really plagues Olana, which isn't explicitly said by the author, but we can see it because she's really questioning herself on what is actually happening, but wanting to still support the state. And we see this with her marriage, where she wants to take certain precautions, but she's questioned on why these precautions need to be taken by her husband, who is full heartedly for Bafra, so he doesn't believe in precautions. And in addition to this political dimension in the marriage, we see regular marital problems such as infidelity and grief, because they lose a lot of friends and family in this war, and that takes its toll, and hunger. That in and of itself is a major strain, which Odenigbo also feels because he feels he's incapable to support his family. And we see the plights of other characters as well, such as Ugwu, who is facing the fear of conscription, because since Biafra is not doing well in the war, they are going around in the Biafran state looking for young eligible men that are able to bolster the front line. So he is plagued with this knowledge constantly, sometimes from himself, but also from other people. And each character has their own plights that they are dealing with in reaction to the secessionist movement, which is interesting to see. And we go through them experiencing this, dealing with it, and we move through the book with them. So this book does have very strong themes, which the author makes very easy to read, because now I come to the writing style. The writing style is amazing. The author deals with such complex historical, political, thematic content in such a beautiful and simplistic way. She doesn't make it so complex in the writing where you're not able to understand, which I really appreciate. She lets you see it plainly written, but not so plain where it feels like she doesn't have trust in you to understand it, because she does leave some things ambiguous and lets you, work your brain and try to figure stuff out. So she doesn't hold your hand through the book. There is inherent trust in the reader, but there is also a care in which she handles you, because she wants you to get it and she wants you to understand. So she makes her writing as accessible as possible. So I do think that this book could be read by a large swath of people because of the accessible writing, even with the excerpts within the book. It is not done in a way where it's like so jarring, and you do get it as the book goes on. But the only thing that would stop me from recommending this book to everyone is, as I said, the strong themes. There are a lot of strong depictions of images in this book, which might be disturbing to some people. A lot of death, because there's a lot of violence in this book. This book is very violent because it is depicting a struggle and a war between Biafra and Nigeria. So this book is not neat and pretty, and it does have a lot of death and violence. So I would warn you that if you want to read this book, take that in mind. But if you're able to cope with that, the book is beautiful and it's very much worth reading, which is why I have to rate it 5 stars. 5 out of 5 stars. I literally have no qualms with this book. It makes you feel every emotion, like every single emotion you feel in this book: appreciation, sadness, happiness, just grief, loss. The book is really compelling and a true masterclass in how to build in depth and complicated characters. Genuinely, I think the characters and the care that the author put into the characters is the strongest point of this book for me, which is what I absolutely love. So, yeah, I recommend this book 5 out of 5 stars. But before I wrap up the episode today, I want to read a poem that was written in the book by the author. Now, if you know me and you've watched the earlier episodes, you know that I love a poem, and I haven't read a book in a really long time that's had a poem in it by the author. So to come across this poem in here was so refreshing, and I really want to share it. And it comes from the book within a book in the novel, and it talks about the hunger that's experienced by the people in Biafra, and it relates to the name of the book within the book. So the poem is called "Were You Silent When We Died?" So, quote: Did you see photos in '68 of children with their hair becoming rust, Sickly patches nestled on those small heads, then falling off like rotten leaves on dust. Imagine children with arms like toothpicks, with footballs for bellies and skin stretched thin. It was kwashiorkor, difficult word, a word that was not quite ugly enough, a sin. You needn't imagine. There were photos, displayed in gloss filled pages of your life. Did you see? Did you feel sorry briefly? Then turn round to hold your lover or wife? Their skin had turned the tawny of weak tea, and showed cobwebs of vein and brittle bone. Naked children laughing, as if the man would not take the photos and then leave alone. End quote. So that is all I have to say today about Half of a Yellow Sun. Beautiful, beautiful, classic book. Amazing characters, amazing plot. History is rich. Go and read it now. If you've read it, reread it again because I will in due time. And yeah, if you want to hear more about my thoughts on any other books, you should go back and watch some of the episodes or follow me on socials. But if you don't want to do that, just come back in 4 more weeks for another episode of ZTalks.